what time it is? What time is it? Guess what time it is? What time is it? It's my Antics time, and welcome back to the episode of Epicness where we explain how to change your brain from a migraine into the rain. I don't know. We're going to be switching out test tubes today, and we have 3 methods that we're going to be talking about to do so that'll make ant keeping a lot easier for your queens and young colonies, along with you new ant keepers that are wondering, how the heck do I get them out of this test tube and into a new one without freaking them out or them freaking us out? Let's twist into it. In every young queen's life who takes residence inside of a test tube, the time comes when the cotton or the test tube as a whole starts to get funky. And I don't use that word loosely. You will know when your young queens and colonies test tube get funky by the state that it's in. You'll start to see mold growing in the water or the cotton, for this example. Or you'll start to notice the water turns a pink, a green. We've seen purple and black and even some neon yellow before. And these are all different kinds of bacteria that are decently common when ants are living in test tubes. Some of this bacteria may come from the queen themselves, but other times it just comes from our fingers when we're making the test tube. We don't even know it, but our hands are dirty and it slowly grows into the water or the test tube in general. Or there are worst case scenarios like mites are inside of the test tube with them. Mites like to hang on to the queens, and the mites will start to eat the brood of the queens, and it turns into mold and fungus and all that. But today we're going to talk about methods to take test tubes that are in this condition or worse and make them move into a nice clean test tube that they will be happy in and you'll feel good about. The first method a lot of new ant keepers learn about when it comes to changing out their test tubes is the light to dark method. This involves brightening up their current test tube, leaving it in the light, and giving them a darker option, their new test tube, as a more suitable home for them where there isn't as much light. To set up one of these light to dark test tube switch setups is quite easy. Let's take a look now at how we would do this. Take your test tube that has your queen or young colony. Next, you want to take the cotton off and line that up with a new test tube. Next, you could take a little bit of tape, pinch both of the test tubes with your fingers to make sure that they are aligned, and put the tape on. To guarantee that it is a secure connection, you can also lift it up from the top at this point and place a small piece of tape on the bottom as well. At this point, your connection is clear, and you can take either the new test tube and put it under something like a towel or maybe a cardboard box cutout. But in this instance, I made one of my old favorite designs that I made up, and this is called a test tube sleeve. It's made with paper or paper towels and electrical tape. And the main use of this is you should be able to slide it right on and over that new test tube. Now then, this is not an instant fix. You have to be patient and wait for your ants to eventually travel down, find the darker location, and start moving her brood, or if it's a colony, start moving the workers and brood and queen into the new test tube. Queens like to have safe, clean environments for their colonies, and they don't like to live in unclean settings. So eventually, your little queens and workers will move into this new test tube. It goes without saying that option 1 by itself will eventually work, and your colony will end up in the new test tube over time. Method 2, however, involves Method 1 as part of the plan. Not only do you want to use the light to dark method, but you also want to include heat to this. Lots of ant keepers have discovered that if you put heat underneath where the ants are, it will slowly move them into the new test tube over time. The gist of it is you want to put the heat right underneath the ants. Over time, you want to inch the heat source with them. If you're using a heat mat, you want to keep it away from the water, so maybe a corner of the heat mat would work. But you want to move the heat source with them as they travel closer and closer to the new test tube. Eventually, they will get the hint and they will move in. Ants don't like to be directly by heat if they're not looking for it. So this method is a good way to speed up the process per se. And along with that, it's easy, it's simple, and it gives you the option of not waiting a whole bunch of days just for them to move. Now the one downfall to this is there's always the possibility that you might discover if the heat source gets too close towards the middle, that she could always move back. So you never want to rush it. You want to inch it slowly and progress her towards the new test tube altogether. The last method I'm going to show today is for intermediate to expert level ant keepers who are used to handling their ants. This method involves paintbrushes and manually moving them from their old test tube to their new test tube. After you've gotten most of the brood, you can go ahead and start grabbing the queens. Understandably, they're going to be a little shook, so try to move them as quick as possible. After you move your queens in, do your best to look around their old test tube to make sure you didn't miss anything. Most importantly, after you have your colony moved in, make sure to put them in a dark, warm place so they can relax and adjust to their new test tube. Switching out your colony's test tube is something that all ant keepers must do from time to time. No matter how careful you are, a test tube will get gunked up and funky eventually. Knowing the methods and improvising them when you're ready will make sure that the process goes a lot smoother and make sure that you know what you're doing and have everything under control. From the light to dark method, to using heat, to even manually moving them, make sure you use the methods that you're comfortable with, and remember not to rush. One last important, crucial piece of advice that I want to mention to all ant keepers. In the past, I've seen very frantic ant keepers that don't, for some reason, have the patience or the time to use the methods that we should improvise safely for our ants. Instead, they like to take their ant colony, attach them to another test tube, and bash them into it. Not only does this put your ants under an enormous amount of stress, but it puts them in a panic position where they might not only start eating their brood, but in special cases I've seen them even attack each other in the confusion. Under no circumstances should you ever smack your ants around. Remember, we got into this because we love them and we want them as pets. And what are pets? They're part of the family. Well, that wraps it up, ladies and gentlemen. I love y'all. Thank y'all for the support. If this channel helped you in any way, shape, or form, I'm glad to hear it. And I'll see you all next time in the future. Wish y'all happy ant keeping, and I am out. Peace.